Hello forum members, this is G47 for ZeroPointFuel. It's been a while since I've had a video. This is an update on my wheel, a progress update. I wanted to get out to you today what I am calling my meter box per se, okay? If you've been following the forum, you know the wheel's done and the cart and the batteries are done. I just need to get the wiring done and all that is pretty much ready to go. The challenge I was running into, and I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit, okay, is that I was struggling with having a bunch of meters on my small cart all over the place. So I came up with what I'm calling my meter box, all right? As a matter of fact, if you hone in right there, it actually says meter box. So I want to tell you a little bit about this box. Basically, it is a enclosure that you would use or find in a home nowadays for cabling or cable box, right? I got that on Amazon cheap. I found these meters, these APN panel meters, which are fantastic. And when I fire this up, I'll talk about that a little bit. There's currently 10 meters on there, and I'm going to talk about why I have 10 meters. Okay, this column here, or this vertical column here, is going to be voltages, and this column here is going to be amps. These two are voltages, and they're going to be used to measure the batteries themselves, okay? So if you've been following my thread on my build, you know I like things flexible. What I did was I was struggling with how I was going to create all the connections when I go to tap into the meter box, right? So what I did was I created all these pigtails that came out of the box, and each set of these pigtails, for example, if you can see that there, M7 is a pigtail that comes out positive, negative. That's not a good example. That's actually a blue cable. I ran out of black. Let's pick M4. Same thing, right? And what I had there is a red cable and a black cable. Basically, every one of these panel meters has two inputs, or has an input, a positive and a negative, right? And I'll be able to measure either voltages and amps. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this video. I just wanted to just really give you an update. The other thing I did is I gave myself a little bit of flexibility on how the panel runs. This panel can run off either a 12-volt battery, right? Or in my case, what I did was I found one of these power supplies that convert AC to DC, right? And this is a 1 amp 12-volt power supply. And the reason I went with an AC power supply is, for those of you who've been following the forum, or at least the electrical schematic, you'll know that you could probably plug this into the inverter on the input side of the schematic, and you'll be able to basically fire up, in my case, my meter box, which is entirely DC, right? So it converts AC to DC. But for today's presentation, I'm just going to plug it into a power strip that I got here next to the motor build, right? And this is again a flexible pigtail that comes into the meter box, and it basically has a negative and a positive going in there. All right, so let's fire this thing up and let's show you what I got. All right. Again, the flexibility here is that this box is, the intent of the box is not to be part of the wheel. I've got it resting on the cart for the purpose of the video. But this meter box is actually going to rest off to the side on a tripod stand, or just a regular wooden stand that I'm going to make for it. I'm not going to get fancy. So I can move it around, and I'm going to extend all the connections at the various points of the wheel, either at the capacitors or whatever the case may be, to each and every one of these connections. I have 4 sets of volts and amps. But if I want to measure 2 sets and not use the other 2, then that's fine. Then these will just not be used. But if I want to use all of them, I will. And in my case, I will. All right. So let's fire this thing up. First of all, I want to fire up the meter box, right? That gives me a little light there. And this actually will control the whole meter box. Let's fire up all the meters. Voltages, voltages, volts, amps, right? Second set, volts, amps, and I'm going to step back after I light this whole thing up. It's actually pretty cool once it's all lit up. So as you can see, the entire panel is all lit up. It draws about 1 amp of power just to run the whole thing. That wasn't fun to do because I didn't have enough. I blew a fuse and so on and so forth. And I'll show you the inside when I get ready. So let me zoom in a little bit closer. These APN meters are actually great. They run about 52 bucks each. I know that sounds a little pricey, but if you sum up what a regular digital multimeter would run you, any half decent meter, they're gonna run you about the same anyway. And again, I wanted flexibility where I wanted to be able to move this box off to the side and again, extend pigtails to any one of these connections, which I'm gonna show you here in a minute of how I did it, right? So what I'm going to walk through just real quick is to show you what meters I'm going to be using for what, for the purposes of our wheel on the forum and what I'm going to be measuring. Meter 1 is actually going to meter the input battery banks. Just going to make sure that they're running at least 12 point something volts, right? Meter 2 is actually going to measure the voltages on the output battery banks. I'm going to inject images of the schematics in this video as I move along so you kind of have an idea what I'm talking about, okay? Meters 3 and 4. Now I'm going to zoom in on this amp meter. You can probably see this right here. It says VBIC. That's voltage before input caps. These meters are actually programmable. You can program the range as to what you want to measure. In my case, I'm measuring up to 400 volts. The input caps or voltages before the input caps is not going to be 400 volts. This is a 120 volt system coming into the wheel. So I'm actually going to trim this back and reprogram it to be just 200 volts. So 200 is on the high end. Okay. This is the amps side. So that's going to be the equivalent of the M3 meter here. And this is going to measure amps. This is amps. Let me zoom in on that. Hopefully you can see that. Amps before input caps. So there's a label on each and every one of these, okay? Meters 5 and 6 are going to be measuring the volts and amperages after the input caps. Meters 7 and 8, voltage and amps, are going to measure the voltage in the amps coming out of the wheel before the output caps. I want to see what kind of voltages I'm getting coming out of the wheel before they get conditioned by the output capacitors, right? Voltage and amps here, meters 9 and 10, are going to measure voltages and amps after the output caps. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because I don't know if I have the right caps or the right capacitors. I don't know what my capacitors are going to do. If my capacitors are doing something silly or they're not giving me enough juice or whatever the case may be. And again, I don't know enough. I'm on the forum along with everybody else. I'm learning as I'm going. And if there's something weird going on voltages before the output caps and amps before the output caps, and there's something going on after the output caps, then you have to attribute it to the fact that it's the input caps. The switches are kind of cute. You know, I can turn off any particular meter I want. Let me just do these here to center in the camera. So if I'm not using 5 and 6 for whatever reason, or I'm not ready to use them, I can just turn them on or off. Okay. All right. I'm going to cut this video. I'm going to make a quick connection so that I can just show you the flexibility. I'm just going to do volts. I can't do amps because the wheel's not running. But so I'm going to just show you basically what it looks like with a battery hooked up to it. All right, be right back. All right, forum members, I'm back. So what I've done is I've got a battery sitting down here on my bench. I created a little pigtail for the purposes of just this demonstration, and it's got, you know, a positive and a negative. This battery obviously is running at 12 point something volts. I've opted to, for the purposes of this demonstration, hook it up to voltage meter M5, just meter 5, okay? I could have done meters 3, 5, 7, or 9, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to show you, here it goes. So meter M5 is currently measuring 12.61 volts. And if this were hooked up to the motor or the wheel, this would have been registering for, let me get this right, voltage after the input caps, if this connection were truly indeed after the input caps. That's pretty much it. I'm loving my new meter box. What I'm going to do is just create a quick stand for it. I am going to do a test run. Hopefully there'll be some positive results. That's it for this video. This is G47 for 0 Point Fuel. Appreciate you looking at the video. We're out.